What can people do who know somebody that is struggling with addiction?
As I, started working with addicts, you really get a different view of what it is to be an addict.
We're not created for all pleasure all the time. There is a pleasure-pain principle to keep our bodies and our brains in check. Hi everyone, this is Gary Blackard, and you're listening to the Hope Within Reach podcast. Here we're helping people understand addiction all through a biblical lens. So if you want to understand what's really happening and what to do next, give us a listen. Welcome to the Hope Within Reach podcast, a podcast dedicated to understanding the chaos of addiction. And we look at it from several lenses, including the faith-based lens, the Christ-centered lens, the scientific or science lens, and the relational lens. We're continuing our dialogue today with Mike Cordry, the marketing manager of Adult and Teen Challenge of the Northeast. Mike, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Well, last time we talked, Mike, we talked a lot about enabling behaviors, codependent behaviors, your story, of course, and what you saw in your father, what you dealt with your mom who was struggling with alcoholism, and then, of course, your own addiction, and what enabling and codependency does in relationships. Today, I want to continue the dialogue, Mike, as last time we talked with enabling and codependency. I want to talk more about what can loved ones do? What can people do who know somebody that is struggling with addiction? What are some other steps that they can take? And I want to start with, and you mentioned this in our last program, getting educated on addiction. What does that mean to you? How can someone get educated on addiction?
There's so many resources out there for people now more than ever. There's a ton of stuff online that you can look up that's not only going to tell you the science behind the addiction, and of course, each, like I said last time, each person's addiction is unique. So, the best way to learn about your loved one's addiction is to speak with them directly if that's something you feel comfortable doing. Just because, where I was, 20 years ago isn't necessarily where someone else is going to be who's, was an alcoholic. But you can look that stuff up online. There's tons of resources. There's drugabuse.gov. There's celebraterecovery.com. There's familiesanonymous.org. There's rehabs.org. A simple Google search about, what do I need to know about alcohol addiction? What do I need to know about meth addiction or heroin addiction? And, there's going to be a ton of video resources. There's books, which we reference several books: Breathing Underwater, Spirituality and the 12 Steps by Richard Rohr, Addiction and Grace, Love and Spirituality and the Healing of Addictions by Gerald May. Those are just a couple examples. But there's so many resources online, and there's also support groups.
Yeah, I want to interrupt you because I think it's important for our listeners to understand. You have to understand your learning style, right? So as you shared, Mike, there's just a wide variety of resources, whether it's watching a video, whether it's listening to an audio podcast or an audio book, whether it's discussing with an expert or having a conversation with a family member, trying to find out more about addiction. I think you have to start with what's your learning style. What are you comfortable with taking information in, because there is so much out there and there's a lot of great resources. In fact, one of the newer resources we have is recoverymeans.com, which is a website, kind of the one-stop shop, if you would, the one-size-fits-all, where we really invested in a website that brought a lot of other websites together in one, so that people can go there and get a lot of information that they need. Also, I just read a new book by Pastor John Ortberg, called Steps, and he actually takes the 12 steps from Alcoholics Anonymous or AA, and he brings them back to the spiritual foundation that they were 100 plus years ago. and he walks through not only the practical steps that need to take, but also the spiritual foundation that each step had. So it's a fantastic book as someone who may not be struggling with addiction, but you want to understand it more. That's a great book, a great resource. You can listen to it on audio, or obviously read it as well. So to your point, I think getting educated on addiction is so critical because, listen, I'll be transparent. I'll share my own story. Never had a real issue with alcohol or drugs. Never was addicted to either one. In fact, I didn't take drugs at all. Obviously, had a few beers here and there when I was in the Marine Corps and all of that. So, but never really had an issue early on in life. But there's other life controlling issues in life, right? There's coffee, dare I say it. There is food, there is shopping, there is sports, there is working out. I mean, a lot of things can become a life controlling issue. And one of the things I wanted to share with our listeners and viewers is I had a little aha moment in my life when I took the role that I serve as president and CEO of Adult and Teen Challenge USA, a faith-based addiction recovery organization. I had an aha moment when I really started understanding what happens in the brain when addiction takes control.
Right.
And Mike, I don't know about you, but there's books like Dopamine Nation by Dr. Anna Lemke, who talks
absolutely.
about how the power of dopamine has taken over the American population, and we're a dopamine nation, and we want our likes on social media, and we want dopamine hits in the brain, right? That was an aha moment for me. Did you have any aha moments when you started learning more and more about your own addiction, coming out of addiction, and now you're dealing with people in addiction? What were some of those learnings for you?
Well, luckily, the program does a great job of providing a curriculum. Anyone who's familiar with the program knows that this isn't the easiest program in the world. Its aim is long-term recovery. So throughout the phases, they give you several books about faith and addiction, and I think that's even more now than it ever was in the past. But I think for me, I was as I was doing research into what my mother would need to really get it, and like this was before I even thought Teen Challenge was an option. As I really understood for the first time that a lot of the things that I had as traumatic events in my childhood, she had no recollection of at all. And that the reason she was drinking in the first place was to forget completely, which was very different from my addiction, which was all about feeling good. I just wanted to feel good all the time. And I wanted the function of whatever drug I was doing. I wanted to feel it at its full effect. And I wanted to remember it. But it was really a healing moment for me because I realized just how much pain she was dealing with, and how similar that was to mine. So that's something I learned when I was, and volunteering. I think also volunteering is another thing we mentioned in the book. As I, started working with addicts on a daily basis, not only in Teen Challenge, but in other settings, you really get a different view of what it is to be an addict and what it is and just the wide scope of addicts. Just like everyone, there's we're all very different. There's so many different types of people that end up becoming addicted, and learning those things hands-on, it's so rewarding.
It is important, right? Yeah, it is important. And I think getting the education, because let's face it, we're talking about addiction, and most of the time when you're talking about programs like Adult and Teen Challenge or Salvation Army or Citygate Network, the Rescue Mission, or any of the other ministries that help those struggling in addiction, most of the time we're talking about those that are non-functional or dysfunctional. But in reality, functional addiction is just as prevalent, if not more prevalent, across the United States and around the world, where people are addicts, but they're able to function, quote, quote, in society. And so educating ourselves on what that potentially could look like may end up helping each and every one of us. Hey, am I dealing with something that has kind of taken control on my life that I need to be taking a step back and saying, okay, I need to change this. I need the help of God to change this in my life and what that potentially looks like. So there's power in education, power in learning. You know, the other thing I'll mention with Dr. Anna Lemke's book, Dopamine Nation, she talks about the pleasure-pain balance in the brain as well, that we were created, our brains were created. Now, we believe by God. Scientists would say otherwise, obviously. Most scientists, not all, but most scientists would say, you know, hey, it just happened. But we were created, we believe our brain was created by God. So God created a balance of pleasure and pain in our brains, that we're not created for all pleasure all the time. That there is a pleasure-pain principle to keep our bodies and our brains in check and in balance. And so just understanding that principle can go a long way. And hey, you know what? Am I seeking after too much dopamine today? Or do I need to kind of back off and go after some pain? Now, I'm not a masochist. I promise. I'm not. I don't.
No, but it's important. You know, it's not fun as an adult. Someone who, from personal experience, it's not fun as an adult to have to deal with a lifetime's worth of pain.
Yeah.
Especially for someone that's older. My mother, when she finally called me and said, "Michael, I'm ready for change." She had seen such a difference in my own life that she had just been spinning her wheels for so many years, and it was just it's just tremendous.
So your mom called you after how many years? So she started drinking when she was 30, you said. After how many years was she in alcoholism before she finally called you? And
Well, yeah, she was an alcoholic my entire adult life, and up until I was about 2 years, I had come into the program 2 years previous, and she had just seen such a difference in my life. I had done my best to stay in contact with her. I had only seen her one time in the last 10 years because her alcoholism just took her further and further down. And she had whole chapters of her life that were missing. So she finally called me one day, and I knew there was no hope for her. And that's the other thing, is that sometimes we know somebody so well, and we know their patterns of failure so well, that we just we don't hope anymore. But I'm so lucky because this faith community around me believed for her. Even after what God had done in my life, I would pray for it, but believing for it was something different. And God loves to prove me wrong. God loves to show me just how strong He is. And so I never expected the call.
yeah,
She collects a check from the government. She's permanently disabled due to alcoholism, and that is a hard distinction to get. But she had been in and out of these sober treatment facilities for so long, dealing with mental health issues. I just didn't see it happening. And, God proved it wrong. And I told her about the program. I was like, listen, this is not an easy program. But she was, I didn't see it as someone who was, in her 60s when she came into the program.
wow,
But to see the transformation, it wasn't easy. She had, and like what I was saying before, was the, the amount of trauma in her brain that she had to deal with
yeah,
because of avoiding it for so long. You talked about the dopamine in your, the need for dopamine in your brain, the the and dealing with that pain pleasure balance. She
Yeah.
had to deal with all that pain all at once, and it was very hard.
Mm.
And by the grace of God, that was what kept her, was the Lord,
Yeah. Amen.
and really captured her heart in a way that nothing else could.
No, that's great. And I'm sure, at the time when she finally did make that phone call, and obviously in her 60s going into the program, you were well educated by then on addiction as a family member, right? You had come out of your own addiction. You were working for Teen Challenge. You were well educated, which helped you help your mom navigate what she had to navigate. So education's key, folks. For our listeners out there, if you haven't gotten the message yet, one of the steps you can take is learn what you can about addiction, especially your loved one addiction and what they're going through. Learn about the drug they're using. Learn about, or various drugs probably they're using. Learn about them as a person, what they've been through, and maybe understand the story a little deeper. Understand addiction, get educated. That's a big, big step. Another step I want to talk through, Mike, with you, understanding the treatment and recovery options. There's a lot of options out there for people, a lot of options for loved ones to go through it. And so talk to us a little bit about what are some of those options. Why would they want one option over another, or perhaps consider one option over another? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I think that the this is another example of one size does not fit all. Recovery options are gonna you're really gonna have to, a case by case basis. This is one of the reasons you want to learn about your loved one's addiction, is because it's going to help you be have those options available. Researching different programs. There's short-term programs. There's medication-assisted programs that where people can take, like certain medications that help mitigate the symptoms. There's long-term treatments that I don't necessarily recommend, such as methadone or Suboxone. But each person is going to have to make the decision for what they want. And as much as I would, we want to be the ones who decide what our loved one does, it's important to keep an open mind and to take steps where they're available, because it is life and death. And I wouldn't have chosen. This is one thing to keep in mind, though. I wouldn't have chosen Adult and Teen Challenge to begin with. I was an atheist. I did not believe in God. I was just in a desperate situation, and they were the only ones that could that offered to help me. And I can't imagine what my life would have been like without that, or if I had been left to make that decision all on my own. But it is important for each and every
Sure.
addict to be a part of the decision to get help. That's key. That a lot of people just, and that's difficult too, because people are so entrenched in their own addiction that it's hard to set up logistics to even discuss what they want to see out of their life. But we do offer some, like, first steps are probably going to be a detox program, 3 to 5 days. It's not meant for long-term recovery. Very rarely would it work for, within a few weeks. In my opinion, that would be long enough to overcome any addiction. But it's a good place to start.
Yeah.
So getting your loved one into detox to just get the beginning of that, getting their minds back to normal. And then discussing, what do you want to see out of your life? What do you want for the rest of your life? Asking that question can really be a good inroad into talking about long-term treatment or talking to more intensive treatment. Because to an addict, it's like, I just want to do whatever's the easiest thing to do right now, whatever the most comfortable thing is. But having, research in mind, what are the detoxes in your local area? Being ready for when a person hits rock bottom is important. My father, he kicked me out of the house, right? But, did that make things better? Or not in the immediate,
Right.
right? It
Right.
was difficult. It was difficult. It didn't make things better in the immediate. I ended up being charged with armed robbery. And it's like, it's very hard to let go of the control when you're so worried about the other person's life,
Yeah.
and you're worried about them. What if I never see them again? What if they die in their addiction? But I have to say, like when I was ready to finally get to detox, and I granted it didn't work until I came into the long-term recovery, but
Sure.
my father did have options available. And so he did do some research, and that helped immensely.
Yep. Yeah, and you're right. Personalizing, understanding really what the addict has been through, the person that is struggling with a life controlling issue, how long have they been struggling with it? I mean, all too often we assume that someone needs to go through, a year long program when in reality they may be done in 4 months, right? Just because maybe they were only dabbling in alcohol or whatever, and they've entered the program. But I think it's important because you brought up something earlier about detox. I think it's important, real quick, for our listeners and viewers to understand what the continuum of care is for alcohol or substance use disorders, as it's known in the medical community. We're using the broader term addiction or life controlling issues to encapsulate all of the disorders, if you would, that are out there, gambling disorders, social media disorders, etc. But I want to talk about the treatment, and recovery options that are available, and along the continuum of care. So in healthcare, there's a starting point and then sort of this ending point called the continuum of care. What are the care options for a specific treatment that's needed? In this case, addiction. So, Mike, you mentioned detox, and typically 3, 5, 7 days depends on the type of detox that's needed, obviously. Then there's short-term programming, licensed programming. In detox and in short-term programming, there's a lot of tools used, right? There's counseling, of course, individual group counseling. There's Medicaid-assisted treatment, as you alluded to earlier as well, Mike, that they'll use to help taper the withdrawal symptoms. So medications like Suboxone or methadone, which we're not a fan of.
Yeah, not a
Methadone,
fan.
yeah, for sure. But and there's reasons for that, folks. We're not. I'm
Right.
not. So if there are some of you that are on methadone right now and you're listening to this, I'm not. We're not knocking you or judging you, et cetera, et cetera. There's just reasons that we've seen in our own experience in the recovery field on how methadone is abused and misused and just becomes another drug for somebody that is in addiction. So there's the short-term license programming. Then there's small group counseling. Or counseling that can be done intensive outpatient, right? So there's an intensive outpatient component for counseling. Then there's residential programming, and that can vary from 90-day residential programming to a year long to 18 months. It all depends on the provider or ministry that you're looking at. And then, of course, ongoing recovery is your small groups and individual counseling and that. So that's kind of a very broad view of the continuum of care for our listeners. So as complex as that continuum of care is, it's important to understand your loved one. Where do they fit? And are they in their addiction now? Okay, detox is probably the first step. They need to withdraw. They need to come out of the physical effects of that addiction, right? So anyways, for our listeners, again, getting educated about addiction, understanding what that continuum of care is, understanding what the treatment and recovery options are along that continuum goes a long way in choosing the right programs for your loved one. The other thing I'll say, Mayo Clinic does a really good job, and they talk about the 4 dimensions of a person's life and how someone in addiction or someone with a substance use disorder, that providers must focus on all 4 dimensions comprehensively, same time. There's the biological, obviously the physical body, and focusing on fixing and helping navigate all of the physical symptoms that come up, and or physical impact, right? That happens when someone's been in addiction a long time. Well, now you got to navigate medical issues as a result of that. You got biological, you got psychological, what's happening in the mind, the emotions, and all of that. You've got sociological, relationships, and all of those aspects. And then you have spiritual, and the focus on spiritual. Now, Mayo Clinic, in their book, Mayo Clinic would say you need to do all 4 comprehensively. So for our listeners and our viewers, if you're trying to look for an option for your loved one, make sure that option is looking at all 4. And programs like Adult and Teen Challenge and some of the other faith-based ministries that are out there do all 4 very, very well. As I talk about all 4, we get to the spiritual component. I want to talk about connecting with God. You talk about this a little bit in the booklet as well that we'll talk about at the end of the podcast here. I'll give some information on how to download that resource. But we talk about connecting with God. And I want to share a couple of facts, and then Mike, I want you to elaborate on the power of the relationship with Jesus Christ and what that brought to your own life, maybe the life of your mother, that other programs and other ways of dealing with addiction just simply couldn't solve for you. Before we go there, I want to share a couple of facts on faith in addiction. 84% in addiction counseling express the desire for a greater emphasis on spirituality in addiction. That's a huge number. 84% of those in counseling addiction right now, in addiction counseling, 84% would say, and this is all, private, public, secular counseling, not faith-based counseling, secular counseling, 84% say, hey, I want a greater emphasis in spirituality in my addiction. In an evaluation of 278 quantitative studies, so we're bringing the science in a little bit. In an evaluation of 278 quantitative studies, 86% found that faith reduced the risk associated with alcohol use, abuse, or dependence. 86% of those studies showed that faith reduced the risk of alcohol use, abuse, and dependence. And in an evaluation of 185 qualitative studies, 84% reduced the risk of drug abuse, that faith reduced the risk of drug abuse. So clearly, scientifically, the data are telling us faith matters. Faith matters in recovery. Talk to us a little bit, Mike, about how faith mattered to you.
I'll tell you this, faith did not matter to me in the beginning because I didn't know what I was missing. I grew up, with a very ethereal view of God, nothing solid. I didn't really have any, Bible knowledge or anything like that. I actually came in, I lied. I was like, yeah, no, I'm a Christian. And I was faking it for the first probably, 30 to 60 days. But the truth is more powerful than a lie. And I say that I was set up against in my own heart, like against believing in God at all. But there was a little part of me that finally was like, I think I prayed, God, if you're real, do something. And that was it. It was a very small prayer, but God, I can't tell you what a difference it made because as I incrementally in the program over time was getting fed the word of God and getting fed, I was in these prayer groups and I was watching other people that I knew I could tell were addicts becoming free. I was jealous. I was like, I want some of that. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? Eat the meat, spit out the bones. I'll give it a shot. and that's all you need. God showed up, and it was amazing because I feel like there's, God will meet you there, whenever you're willing to take that step. Um, I came in, I was like, this is a crutch. I said, Christianity's a crutch. And Jimmy Lilly said, yeah, man. He said, of course it is. He said, why do you think you're here? Like, and it just kind of blew my mind. He was like, yeah, you've been relying on drugs your entire life. This is the crutch, correct? And when I gave faith a chance, and I'll say this, that the faith community is a great place to be in recovery because environment matters, and being surrounded by Christians, I think, has even if your faith isn't there, your loved one's faith is not anything that you would, or you think it's too extreme to believe in God right in the beginning, that's fine. Being in the environment of the church will help you to get there. And being in Teen Challenge, naturally, I was given an opportunity daily to pray and to worship. And one day, I remember I was in the chapel, and I decided, I was like, I just knew it to be true in my brain. And so I opened myself up to actually worship for the first time. And I was like, God, I don't know you very well, and it didn't even take, me uttering the phrase. And I had an encounter with God that was just unlike anything else I had ever experienced. This hole, this gap, this pain that I had been feeling, this profound sense of loneliness that I had felt, this void that had been in my heart, was filled to overflowing with love and light. And it really, we talk about, coming alive spiritually, and it felt like coming alive for the first time. And that feeling inside of me, that debt, that void was just gone. And I still needed the program because I didn't know how to live right yet. That took a long time because I'd been depending on a pill for so long, or drugs for so long, that it took time to learn how to live right.
Sure.
But from that moment on, I had gratitude
Yeah.
in my heart, and that's never gone away. And I can say that for my mother, it's the same thing. It took her a long time to get there too, but it made all the difference in the world.
Well, these are the questions of life, and this is why the Bible and what we believe, Jesus Christ, why we believe he's the answers, because the questions of life are addressed in who he is, right? And so, and not just for addicts, for all of humanity, because we're all in addiction or in some sort of life controlling issue. It's called sin in the Bible, by the way. But we all have these tendencies to do things that are contradicting the law of God, contradicting of what God had planned for our own lives and what he wanted to call us into his presence and to be one of his kids, his children. And, there's three core areas that I would just mention, again, for our viewers and our listeners. One is hope. There is hope. And when you have Jesus in your life, when you have that component, that the Son of the living God in your life, hope will never go away. You will always have hope. No matter what you're going through in life, you will always have hope. The second thing is meaning and purpose. Now meaning and purpose in my life because of who God created me to be and who he's called me to be, and living in that calling. And so there's meaning and purpose, where a lot of addicts struggle with that, the meaning and purpose of life. Well, I'm not a fan. I know you're not, Mike, either, of, once an addict, always an addict. I hate that statement. I don't identify with that. No other addict who knows Jesus Christ identifies with that, because We're a son or daughter of the living God as believers in Christ. The old ways are passed away, right? All things are new. And so the purpose and meaning and the identity of who we are in Christ goes a long way as well. So let me move us along to the last area. You mentioned in the little booklet about caring for yourself. About if you're a loved one and you've stopped the enabling behaviors, you've stopped the codependency behavior, you've set some boundaries up, including not giving money and protecting yourself. You've understood what addiction is. You've done some education. You've helped your loved one look at least some options that are available to them. You've sought the Lord. You've looked at this spiritually. Now there's caring for yourself, and what does that mean? So, Mike, tell us a little bit about what caring for yourself means.
Well, I see this every day. I mean, you do too, I'm sure. With people coming to recovery, people when this is specifically, obviously talking to the loved ones of the person that's addicted, because we see them come in, and you'll look at the family and you'll see the weight of the addiction, the other person's addiction, all over them. And it's like when you're in a flight, right? What do they say when the little mask comes down? It says, take care of your own mask first, then assist someone else, because if you're passed out, you're not going to help anyone anyways. You're not going to help your child put it on. And it's the same way with addiction. It is imperative for your mental health that you take care of yourself, because that individual who is addicted, they are, and I don't want to say a leech, but they can leech all of your joy, your energy, your time. And so many people lose their identity in their loved one's addiction, because they're constantly trying to put out fires that are being caused by addiction. And that's because there's no other way to live when you're addicted to something else but in chaos. We're talking about the chaos of addiction. It will kill the individual who doesn't let go and take care of themselves. So I mean, and this can look at like not giving up your hobbies, not revolving your schedule around the addicted person, making sure that you're caring for your other family members. There's a lot of times where there's a family member who's addicted, and that person gets all of the attention of the mom or dad, or that parent gets all of the attention of the kids, because it demands so much constantly. And I think it's just very important to take care of yourself, and to take an inventory of the things that you've lost to addiction too. Because all of us are dealing with the constant loss of just all of those resources, and taking an inventory, and taking time to pray, taking time to go to connect with other believers, connect with friends, and that it's very important, and it'll help you keep your sanity at the very least, which is
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
important.
yeah. Other simple steps I would just say in wrapping up this podcast. Other simple steps I would say is spending time in nature. Creation. You could take a 10-minute walk. You could, even in your neighborhood, take a 10-minute walk. Stand in the sun in your backyard. Close your eyes. Stand in the sun and allow the warmth of the sun to be on yourself. There's a lot of little things, little steps that you can take in caring for yourself mentally, physically, emotionally. To Mike's point, I mean, there's so many ways to really ensure that you're putting yourself first as it relates to health, so that you can then be ready to help others, including your loved one who is struggling. So, Mike, thank you so much. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story and the story of your family, and so much to glean from in these episodes. And we're just appreciative of you being with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I'm eternally grateful to this program. And my entire family is. So thank you for letting me come in and share. And yeah, I really hope this helps
Yeah.
someone.
Yeah, well, you're very welcome. And folks, if you're looking for more information, there's a little more detail in the booklet that Mike Cordry has written in collaboration with Adult and Teen Challenge USA and Our Daily Bread, which is a great ministry as well. This is a booklet that you can download from the Our Daily Bread website. You'll see a link on the screen, and this resource is free. You can order multiple copies so you can pass around to families. My loved one is struggling. What do I do? Thank you for listening to Hope Within Reach. We believe there is power in hope, and we know where that hope lies. So thank you for listening. God bless you. Thank you for watching the Hope Within Reach podcast today. If you liked today's conversation, consider leaving a like, a comment, and a follow. Let's get the word out there. Hope is within reach.